I think some good points have been made, but one thing I noticed when I talk to a lot of my female friends is that a lot of us aren't taught how to date. A lot of us aren't considering, um, or maybe we have an ideal of what a marriage should be or what our spouse or partner should be in our own minds. But what that man has may be different, even though he might have all the qualities, provider, etc. That one possesses, like you kind of stated, Di. He's got everything on my checklist, but still in my mind, there's something that he's not giving me. So therefore, I'm not happy. And we sometimes stick within situations because we feel like, maybe we've been with this person for so long, or there isn't really a conflict, there's really nothing wrong with this person, but I just don't like this guy. But at that point, one has to be responsible, an adult and mature, to say, hey, this is not the person for me. Now hopefully that doesn't take 15 years worth of time, and that's why you're supposed to date and go through seasons of good, of bad, of ups and downs, of different emotional levels with the person, to understand what they're truly like, to make the determination as to whether or not this is a good partner for me. And if not, you need to leave that person alone. I think from the parts of the clip I did notice before I got cut off was that she did make an effort. She was there for quite some while, became complacent, but then just realized that this is really not for me. And like I said, that should not take 15 years. I think a little more vetting is needed up front and for both parties, because I can't imagine that the man wasn't feeling some type of way, because energies are reciprocated. And at the end of the day, if she's not happy, that would have bled over into some dynamic of their relationship. So
All right, go ahead, King. Talk.
All right, so I will say this. Um, they probably didn't grow at the same pace. There's probably some work that both sides needed to do. When a guy's leading when a guy's leading in a relationship, his seeing things from the woman's perspective, placing himself in her shoes, is literally the definition of empathy. So we're nearly not that far off on what is required. You're supposed to be a leader that leads with compassion and leads. If you're a spiritually based relationship, you put the higher God first, and you lead with the direction that comes from that higher source, and then you're all following in the same path, right? And when you go about it in that way, you tend to place a higher focus on being on the same page. It seems like they got chapters apart early in the relationship, and nobody took the time to do the extra reading to get back on the same page. Sometimes what that looks like is communications have ceased, sex becomes monotonous, the gap becomes bigger, and sometimes just the smallest bridge seems to be a breath of fresh air, right? And in these situations, what will most likely happen is that she'll regret the decision, because there really isn't anything better out there. Everyone is dealing with some level of trauma. Everyone is the disappointment, right? Your average human being has been shitted on by someone. And we're in this weird space where everyone spends entirely too much goddamn time trying to figure out who has it worse. That pity party is not bringing us any closer. It really isn't. What might be too much for Hank might not be too much for Jay, might not be too much for Luis, may not be too much for me. What's too much for this young lady, or any one of these young ladies, may not be too much for the other. The comparison is a waste of time. When a person is telling you that they're dealing with too much, they're saying what's too much for them. So we just got to figure it out. That's where the compassion and the empathy comes from. Select someone that's worth figuring it out. That's the empowering part that gives us hope.
All right, King Talk. That time up, King Talk. I ain't trying to cut you off, man. I just want to be respectful
No
and fair.
problem.
Everybody, go ahead, Clout.
I think that part of the problem with marriage today is, I forget who said it, but it does have a lot to do with people idealizing marriage and not really taking time to get to know people and date people. I think a lot of times people use marriage as like a way to force the connection that Di was talking about. Like Di was saying, how a person can be doing all the right things, but we just don't have that connection. And connection is something that's very like, unfortunately, connection is something that can be fleeting. Like a connection, you can have a really strong connection that lasts a week. Connections are coming and going, and a lot of times when people sense that the connection is going, what they try to do is they try to bottle up and be like, well, let's turn it into something, because by turning it into this something now, it'll be this ideal connection that I'm imagining in my mind. And I don't think people realize that sometimes that's actually what's destroying their relationship, because it's not allowing it to grow and build into whatever it would naturally be. I almost feel sometimes like if you feel like to stay with someone, y'all have to get married, then that's definitely not the person you should be with. Because I think that the connection should be so solid that it doesn't matter, honestly. I think that whether we right here, whether whether we get married, whether we in a 1-bedroom apartment, whether we in a house, we still choosing each other. I feel like that's the epitome of any relationship. And I feel like that's what people should be looking for. They should be looking for that relationship that they're willing. Like, I think people should be looking for love. And a lot of times love and marriage doesn't really coincide. Marriage has a lot more outside things affecting it, but my time's up, so I'm gonna let somebody else go.
Yeah. I'm gonna say something real quick before we flip the chapter page. Just to kind of go back to what you say, Remy, about Ali. That's a great example. But however, Ali was an exceptional man. He wasn't a regular man, an above average man. He was an exceptional man. So for her to follow him, it's because she understood the inherent value that he possessed and the amount of people around the world globally, as much as they love to hate him, he had a huge impact on everything he moved. So she knew she was with an exceptional man, a once in a generation type of man. And long behold, to this day, we still talk about him, we still praise about him, regardless of how things transpire. Um, I don't think I don't think that women. I'm getting a mean feedback from you, Clout. Yeah, everybody got to mute up in between. I don't think that, honestly, hearing that woman out, I don't think that she was looking for a husband, or a leader, or even a provider. I don't even think any of those things even came up in her lexicon while she was, doing the interview.